Hello, everyone. This is A Bit of Business. My name is John Fitzgerald, and on behalf of learmedia.tv and the British and Irish Trading Alliance, welcome to the show. Social impact, corporate social responsibility, topical terms that now appear on company websites extremely often these days. But what is it? And how do we know it when we see it? And what does good really look like? Our special guests today, John Quinton-Barber from Social Communications and Greg Curtis from ISOspaces, are both active BITA members and will help us explore this topic in a bit more detail. Both men are successful entrepreneurs leading organizations that genuinely deliver a social impact through the work that they do and the products that they produce. John is Group Managing Director for Social Communications and founded the business back in 2013 in Manchester. They provide expertise in stakeholder engagement and planning consultation for clients in the housing, retail, energy, and infrastructure sectors. They are experts in strategy, brand campaigns, communications, and social media, winning multiple awards for their work over the past 8 years. Greg Curtis is the co-founder of ISOspaces, who manufacture portable, modular, and affordable spaces for living and working. Following an earlier career in finance in the City of London, he decided to set up ISOspaces with his business partner Ben Treleaven back in 2013. On a steep learning curve from the start, they have successfully built this business into an award-winning venture that delivers a product ideally suited for affordable housing, which is hugely relevant given the ongoing social housing crises both in the UK and in Ireland. Please do remember to visit the BITA website, BITA.ie, for news about member companies and updates on initiatives across the community, including the Be Plastic Aware campaign that is focused on reducing the amount of plastic used across the construction sectors in Ireland and the UK. That's it, folks. John and Greg coming up next. Please do stay tuned. And we are now live on A Bit of Business. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Morning, John.
Hi.
So let's start with the burning question of the week, guys. And I know everyone in the audience will be very interested in this. And it's really a question that's front and center on everybody's minds right now. Who will win the Champions League final, Man City or Chelsea? John, what do you think?
Well, I wanted a Man City Madrid, to be honest, but I think Man City. I'm a Leeds fan. You might be able to tell this guy behind me is the manager of Leeds, Bielsa, one of my heroes. I think City will do it. I think City's got a game plan. They stuck to it the other night, and it was pretty good football. But who knows? It's Champions League. Chelsea have got form. Who knows?
Greg, what do you think?
Well, I'm by no means an aficionado, so I think I'm going to have to refer to my esteemed colleague and just agree with him on this one.
Well, it's up for grabs. Nice to see two relatively local clubs in the final. And guys, the topic today is social impact, or call it corporate social responsibility. And quite frankly, I'm not sure if it should be called corporate social responsibility, rather just perhaps social responsibility, because it's no longer fitting underneath the corporate umbrella. It's far bigger than that. And I guess it's all about the positive contribution that public and private sector companies and organizations can make to the local communities in which they operate. So I guess let me start with you, John, and ask you, do you think companies today have a moral obligation to have a positive social impact in the communities that they're actually working in?
Absolutely, John. Absolutely. And I think, if you'd asked this question 2 years ago, pre-pandemic, I'd have said, absolutely, John, absolutely. And I think, the world has changed because of the pandemic. And one of the benefits of the pandemic, if there can be any benefits at all, is that it's forced companies to look at how they do business. And no longer can businesses get away by not doing good. So I think it is absolutely, business has to do good. Business has to ensure that the communities that it works in, or the people that work in that company, are treated well, and are left benefiting from that business that's working with them. So absolutely.
Greg, your thoughts?
I mean, yeah, it's such a vast subject, isn't it? But I think there's more pressure on businesses to do more, quite rightly, because their consumer bases are understanding more that they have choice to, and that affects, it means something to those businesses, because they. I think we all need to do more in real terms, but yeah, from a business's perspective, I mean, it's got to be front and center nowadays for new enterprises. I genuinely think that the climate is going to change, where businesses that operate just solely for the profit of shareholders will find it very difficult in the coming decades.
Do you think that it's becoming a competitive advantage, Greg?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, as the habits of the customer shift. I mean, we notice it. I mean, it's a bit different for us because we're B2B predominantly, but we notice it massively filtering through in the public sector work that we do now. So the message from government is filtering through to local government, and the way that things are procured, and the emphasis on corporate and social responsibility and things like tenders are, it's becoming really sort of front and center, and so it should be. And in similarly in consumer businesses, consumers are driving change towards, certainly in terms of the environment and and the CSR that surrounds that. I think people want companies to do better.
John, you are in a fortunate position within your business in social, that you're looking across different sectors, different companies, and folks are actually coming to you to say, please help us with our CSR, our social impact strategies and plans. So when you look across your client base, where do you see really positive social impact happening across some of your customers?
I think it's the attitude, John. I think what we're finding is that there's an awakening to this. Whereas, Greg just talked about procurement before, where, I don't want to be cynical about procurement pre-pandemic or 3 or 4 years ago, but there was very much a tick box exercise going on, I think, where, you ticked a box because you said you'd create so many apprentices. Well, actually now what we're finding is that our clients are embracing it, are embracing the new world of social impact, we like to call it, or social value, where it's not just a tick box, it's actually where they can demonstrate a real evidence base that the work they're doing will either help create jobs, will transform lives, and they're getting the sleeves rolled up and getting bought into it. As a business, we are a marketing communications agency. Your viewers and listeners will understand that we are 10 a penny, across the UK, across the world. But we have a real vested interest in helping businesses improve lives, and it starts with us and how we do our business, which I'll come on to a bit later. But what we're finding is there are 3 key areas that businesses have to predominantly focus on in the very near future. One is net zero, because that is, we're going to we're all working towards a net zero world. The other one is ESG, which is 3 letters that's often quoted, environmental, social, and governance. So it's looking at your ESG strategy to ensure that your business is not just ticking boxes, but it's actually got policies in place to ensure that, if your shareholders are looking at how you do business, they're satisfied that you're doing it in the right way for people and for profit and for planet. And the third one, which isn't really talked about much yet, but which will become more and more apparent, is equality, diversity, inclusion, EDI. So the net zero, EDI, and ESG are 3 areas that if you're looking at your toolkit in your businesses, your strategy, they have to be front and center of how you do business going forward. And it's not tick boxing; it's actually really lived. And the final thing I'll say, John, it starts at home. It starts with your people, your colleagues, because your colleagues are consumers, and they will make a choice whether or not to work with you in the future if you're a business that is either doing good or not doing good. So I think to basically get the best talent and to work with the best colleagues, you need to be in this world now where it is front and center, social impact, social value.
And I noticed John, on your website, you have something called Life Happens, which seems to be part of the DNA of your business. Tell us about that, please.
Very quick. I'm going to swear. I'm going to quote swear word in a second. But life happens. It's basically, I set this up 8 years ago and it's founder story, entrepreneurial. I set it up on £3,000 and family with 2 little girls and a wife that didn't work, happy being made redundant. So I had to make it work. So my focus at social for the first 2-3 years was just make money, survive, pay the mortgage, make money, survive, pay the mortgage. And I was in this kind of like entrapment of make money, survive, when 2 of my colleagues came up independently because they'd lost grandparents in the same week and said to me, John, independently, can I take a day off for the funeral? I was like, yeah, of course you can. Why are you asking me? It's almost like, why do you need to ask me? Then I thought, there's a film. I'm a miner's grandson, so my granddad was a miner. And there's a film called Brassed Off, which hopefully some of you viewers may have seen. And in the film, Brassed Off is led. It focuses on a brass band, which is led by a conductor called Danny. And all Danny wanted to do was for the brass band of his mine to win the competition at Albert Hall. And the miners strike, and the miners are falling apart in front of him. But he didn't care. They're losing the jobs, they're losing the will to live. But he just wanted that band to win at the Albert Hall. And the story of Brassed Off, it shows them winning the competition at the Albert Hall. And Danny stands there, which you'd think would be elated. And he stands there, he refuses to pick up the cup and says, I thought music mattered. I thought it really mattered, but does it bollocks? People matter. So life happens for me. I watched that film in that week where 2 people asked me, could they take a day off? And Life Happens was born. And what Life Happens basically is if you work for social, we've got your back. It doesn't matter what life throws at you. Outside of the working environment, we've got you. And we've had incidents where people have taken, we've fully on full pay 3 months off because they've had to work through an issue. So it's big ticket things in your life, through to the smaller things. We've got your back. And I just want colleagues on a Sunday night not to be dreading coming to work. I want colleagues wanting to come to work for us, and we've got their back. And I have to say, that is all pre-pandemic stuff. That happened in 2015, 2016, and it's something that we've taken through now and developed over time. And yeah, it's just, I care passionately for people, and that's first, that's priority. So it's no longer about roof over my head. It's about ensuring I've got a great business with good people, which also contributes to me having a roof over my head.
And human resource professionals talk about something called discretionary effort in a business, John. And I think what you're describing there, where you do have people's back, you get that extra effort or discretionary effort from people because they know there's a mutual trust in the business, and it fosters good working relationships, good practices, and success, actually. Yeah. Greg, your reflections on this and the importance of having some sort of an internal social compass for the business to make sure that the organization is pointing in the right direction and everybody is sort of rowing behind the leadership to sort of achieve the business goals.
Yeah, it's really interesting listening to your thoughts on those toolkits, because I was kind of thinking to myself, there's a lot of well-established businesses that kind of have to turn a very big ship towards this, and they need those kind of processes and procedures in the business to be able to do that. And I suppose even though we founded ISO Spaces in 2013, so we're not a startup anymore, I suppose, but I think we feel like a startup. We're still small enough that all of the team members have access to all of the other team members quite easily, and it's almost like that culture is organic for us still. So it's more of a, how do we maintain that going forward as we grow, and how do we keep that ethos? And I don't want to say that it's just come naturally. I think quite a lot of it comes actually quite naturally from the work that we do, because predominantly we're providing high quality accommodation for emergency and social housing. So I think people are attracted to the business in the first place because of what we do, and we tend to get good people as a result of that. So we haven't really had to kind of force that on our culture. We think we've been very lucky to have that grow quite organically, but we are probably going to have to take a greater amount of responsibility for ensuring that we maintain that as we grow, because it's quite easy, I think, once you kind of split off into different teams, if you don't have those processes and procedures in place, it can be hard to keep track of it.
So, Greg, in your business, you're actually putting assets on the ground that are having quite a big social impact for the folks who are living and using those assets, because you're sort of trying to address one of the challenges of our day, the affordable housing crisis, because there's lots of housing around, but not lots of affordable housing around. And I think that's where ISO Spaces fits. So the social impact that you're having there clearly is a positive reflection on the organization. And does it sort of seep back into the company, the good work that you're doing and the lives that you're impacting by putting those assets on the ground? Do people feel good about it?
Yeah, I mean, you do. It's hard because you get lost in wanting to do the next thing and do more. I mean, we're at the really harshest end of this problem, and without doing ourselves a disservice, I'm not actually sure that our solution is the answer at a macro level. It's a solution for the short term. So our accommodation units, they're all building reg specification. They're done out really nicely. When you walk in them, it's just like walking in any other kind of new build flat. But we're providing those for people as a temporary accommodation before moving, sort of ready social housing. So we're really bridging the gap between homelessness and social housing, whereby local authorities are having to put people in bed and breakfasts. They're sharing bathrooms with corridors of people, and it's like this is a way that we can provide buildings quickly and cost effectively that give people their own front door and the internet. And the reality of the situation is that temporary housing is supposed to be for kind of up to 8 to 10 weeks. And in a lot of instances, people are there for, an awful lot longer than that. So we need to make the standard of temporary accommodation livable for longer periods of time, because there just isn't the follow-on social housing. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, to go back to your question, yeah, it feels great when we give over the keys and we know that, we've delivered apartment block of 100 units, and we know that 200 or 300 people aren't going to be sleeping on the streets. But at the same time, we know that we're a drop in the ocean for that problem, and we're trying to explore ways that we can deal with that at a more systemic level and actually solve the social housing bit. And it's a much bigger issue. It needs more governmental support, and it's it needs funding, and it needs public and private sector cooperation in order to be able to make effective changes over a bigger scale. So yeah, it's great that we feel like we're sort of eating the elephant one bite at a time, but we're not quite. I suppose there's always a sense that there's more to do.
John, there was a very interesting report at the back end of last year issued by the National Housing Federation, and there was a couple of statistics in there, talking about affordable housing that were quite stark, frankly. And the headline was that 8 million people in England have some form of housing need, and their suggestion was that for 3.8 million of those people, rented social housing would be the best solution. Now, 3.8 million people, that equates to about 1.5 million homes. When you think about the fact that they're building about 55,000 affordable homes across the country per year, the numbers just don't add up when you're talking about brick and mortar. And brick and mortar is all fine and dandy, fantastic, go for it. However, 55,000 into 1.5 million, it doesn't work. So it's a big problem, as Greg says. What are your thoughts on how you best tackle that to try and start to fundamentally address the issue?
It's a massive problem, John, and Greg, you did touch on it, didn't you? It's political. We need 300,000 or 400,000 a year to even start to make an impact. And, I think at run rate 50,000 a year is not going to happen, is it? I think there's too much focus on home ownership. And that's where the challenge and the problem lies. We work with George Clark, the TV architect from Channel 4 fame, Amazing Spaces, and we helped George run his campaign to build more council houses. And we got, in a space of a week, we've got about 400,000 signatures to a petition to government to say, look, we need this debated in Parliament. And he got to a select committee to talk about it pre-pandemic, but since then it's kind of like it's stalled, because I think pandemic and focus has been on elsewhere. am I confident? And it's not political. I'm pretty apolitical, to be honest. But with the current government, it's probably going to be really challenging to get them to focus on building more council housing when their absolute focus is on home ownership. So there's an uphill struggle there. I think there has to be still, the National Housing Federation are brilliant. They lobby hard. The TCPA, the Town and Country Planning Association, they lobby hard. Is the message being heard? It is being heard, but it's very, very slow. I know in Sunderland, so some local authorities, Sunderland have started to build their own again, which I think is fantastic, and they've got some real quality there. So I think it's piecemeal, piece by piece, targeting local authorities. And Greg, you mentioned the magic word there, funding. Where's the money going to come from? How can this be made to happen? There has to be a new way of looking at this. There has to be a new way of modelling this. Section 106 isn't enough. There has to be some way that we can help, or local authorities can actually get to grips with this issue. Because, like you say, it's not going to go away.
I mean,
years post-pandemic, it's going to get worse.
This is something that we've been right in the middle of, right? So, and it's not it's funny when you ask the question. It's like, oh yeah, so what's the answer to the housing crisis? You can't encapsulate that. It's a big problem. But I think you've kind of got quite close to the nub of it. I mean, there aren't enough houses being built by a long shot. And when we talk about housing crisis, it's almost like a phrase that's just in the common vernacular now. It doesn't hit home. But it's not a housing problem. It's not housing issue. It's a crisis. I mean, and it's not. You should digest that every now and again, because when you're talking about a shortfall of 250,000 houses every year over a period of years that now is extended, that problem was there when we started our company, and it's more stark now than ever. And I think there's a number of elements to it that we've kind of touched upon. There needs to be public and private sector cooperation to be able to solve that meaningfully. And it needs to be profitable for the private sector, for them to engage in a way that will make a meaningful change. And that can come from a lot of different ways, but we're working with an organisation at the moment with a local government. And we hope that we're going to be able to set something up in cooperation to start testing how different models can work for financing, and it will be on a small scale at first, I'm sure. The second is the supply. So you've got the supply of houses coming from an amount of big house builders in the UK that you can count on both hands, and their models are very profitable. They do well for their shareholders, and no one's challenging the fact that in 2021 we're still going out into a field with 100 guys and some sticks to build houses. So this is where ISO spaces look at modular as a real solution. But in order for us to get there at scale, that needs to be adopted, and there needs to be better systems to allow local government and housing associations and developers to be able to procure these things more safely. And it's still an industry that people don't quite understand in the UK. And when we look at government investment into that, I mean, just recently the Chancellor announced that there would be an investment into a modular manufacturing or modern methods of construction task force to look at this issue, but the funding is £10 million. Now, £10 million is not an inconsequential amount of money. However, it's not enough to look into this in depth and to start thinking about how those modern methods of construction can be properly integrated into the house building industry. So we've got a hell of a long way to go, I think.
And John, when you look at this macro problem, and again, you're working across, big geographies, clearly there are some government entities, local councils that get it and understand, right, we can't solve this by doing what we've always done. We need to look at alternative solutions, etc. Why is there such a great disparity between local governments or local councils in their approach when these people are tasked with solving the problem, yet sometimes there's a perception that, well, we just need to keep doing what we've always done and hopefully that will get us to where we want to go? Why is there such a discrepancy?
I think it comes down to political leadership, John, and obviously the beauty of a democracy is that, that we vote in those politicians that we want to see leaders. And it's down to strong leadership. And also, you look at you mentioned there, Greg, about a load of blokes in a field. The load of blokes in the field model, it takes time to get planning, it takes time to get developments through. Some local areas have the political will to do that, others clearly don't. And I've been involved with developers for at least 8 years on some on greenbelt sites, some on brownfield sites, where it's taken years to get a plan through their local planning process. So politics holds it up, and because politics is cyclical today, we're recording this today, where it's the local elections in the UK, where so again, there's been a little bit delay on decisions. There'll be a new administration in most local authorities, and it'll take them another probably 6 months to get around to looking at the plans, and it just drags and takes time. So I think I live in Greater Manchester, and there's the Greater Manchester Combined Authority. They've been looking at this for 4 years about their policy around and their framework for development. If you talk to developers, they're just tearing their hair out, because again, it's just taking time. So there's not one real clear answer there, John. It's a multitude, but it comes down to politics, leadership, the political will to get it done, and the political will sometimes to be unpopular and drive it through. And not many politicians. I don't know if you know any politicians that like to be unpopular. I don't know many locally.
I think you're completely right. Obviously we've got to look to our leadership. An interesting kind of an interesting thought on this in recent times is, and especially with the length of things, we've spent a really long period of time working with local authority to get a singular development down for homeless people that need it right now. So where we're talking about larger chunks of social housing, it becomes a much more prohibitively administration heavy kind of process to get those things through. But if you look at what we did as a country in the COVID crisis, when we said we can't have people homeless in this we mobilized hotels. The government were doing deals with Whitbread to put people in Premier Inns, and all of a sudden we got everyone off the street pretty much. We did a bloody good job, I think, as a country to do that in that short space of time. And that was because there was a attitude running through local government of, we just need to get it done, whatever it takes right now. This is more important because people are going to die if we don't do it as a result. Well, the situation is that dire in that particular scenario, regardless of COVID. So if we can do it now, why can't we do it regardless? Why is it not a top priority? And that's part of the message that we need to be getting out there to people, there's some charities that do great work in that space. But, if we can do it via COVID, why can't we just get everyone off the streets to start with? It might not solve the housing problem longer term, because that's a building and political and financing issue that we've discussed. But for rough sleeping, for the really tough bit of it, I think we could do more. We could do better, and we could be doing it a lot quicker, as evidenced by the fact we kind of have done.
I think, Greg, sorry for interrupting there, but I think you guys work in such an important space, massively important. If you can sort that bit out, if you sort this element out, then the rest will follow. And I think one of the things that really frustrates, the wrong word, angers me is the permitted development rights. So where you've got local authority that says, okay, we've got a disused, there's an office block down there. We don't need to, it won't be a local authority that goes, but it'll be the developer that goes, I want to convert that into flats or temporary accommodation. And there's a couple of examples. One in Harlow, where you've got families living in what was an office block in rooms without windows in the pandemic with kids. And that's the permitted development right. You don't need the planning permission to convert that into flats. And I think that urgently needs addressing, because what you guys are doing is offering something which is totally accessible, which is a home. And it's temporary, of course, but it's a home. It's home environment. And we don't need to talk, do we, about what that means for mental health, for well-being, for future, for confidence, for getting on in life. And I think this is where there is still a lot of work to be done in certainly in the UK and other parts of the world, that in terms of what we need to do to be addressing this. And I do think, it goes back to what you guys do, the little I know about you, Greg, but what you do is fantastic. I think, it's just getting that message out there.
What you're talking about there, Greg, during the pandemic, in a time of crisis, the social impact from getting all those folks into accommodation and off the streets, fantastic. A wonderful example of what real social impact can actually look like, and transformational for those people. Let me switch gears slightly now, guys, because we've talked about affordable housing and the social impact around that, but I'm also interested in something that is relevant for many of the members across the British and Irish Trading Alliance that are active in the construction sector, because we're heavily focused on that sector. And it's the whole area of plastic pollution, which is something that BITA has sort of taken up and run with, because there's a lot of work to do in the construction sector. And there's a couple of interesting statistics from our friends at Changing Streams. Brendan Kenny, who's the Isle of Man chair of BITA and works at Changing Streams, issued a very interesting infographic just outlining the extent of plastic and the presence of plastic in the construction sector across Ireland and the UK. 23% of all plastic produced in the UK is consumed by the construction sector, and 3 times more plastic waste is produced by the construction sector and industry compared to all UK households combined. What are your thoughts on that, John?
For me, as a start, in fact, I wasn't aware of that was that high, John. I think the first word that comes to mind is innovation. We have to innovate. We all know there's a problem. It's not going to go away. We can't let it get worse. We've got to make it better. And I think I talk about the generation that's coming behind me and the generation that's coming behind them. They won't allow this to happen. So, and quite rightly. So for me, it's about investment in innovation. I would like to see, and it could exist already, is an investment fund. And it might be, I don't want to be unpopular here with contractors and developers, of whom I have lots of clients, but it could be a fund that they contribute to, an innovation fund, to find the answer to this solution. I'm all for the power of innovation. So there has to be something there. I think education as well is very important, isn't it? It's about ensuring that businesses are aware of their what I call their fumes, not the fumes from their exhaust, but I call it to watch what's happening behind and what impact they're having. So education, but innovation is an innovation fund. Maybe we can create it today.
Perhaps we can. Somebody looking might say that's a great idea. Let's run with it. But John, you're absolutely right, because also another statistic coming from Changing Streams is that 95% of people in the sector believe that more can be done. So you have folks who are ready to actually take action, and we can all take action, especially around our use of single-use plastics. Greg, as a sort of developer or a modular construction company, what are your thoughts on plastic in the supply chain in general and what we can do about it?
Well, I mean, I'm the same as John. I had no idea that it was that high. So as a business owner, that sort of makes me think that there's probably more to be done in terms of awareness, and both personally and in the industry, by the sounds of it. I mean, obviously plastic consumption is a huge problem in kind of every industry now, isn't it? And it affects us when we think about material choices for buildings, because going back to what John was saying earlier, that our customers are demanding that we get high thermal performance buildings that are as close to carbon zero as we can get. So we're trying to constantly improve the building systems that we use. We choose steel buildings because they're recyclable, but we're also now looking at developing systems with cross-laminated timber and other technologies that we think might be more sustainable longer term. So there's always kind of one eye on that. But yeah, in terms of plastic, it's a tough one, right? And I think the innovation point is a really good one. You need sustainable alternatives to those. They only really become available when they become commercially viable. And in order for them to become commercially viable, they need to be invested in. The investment part is another sort of microclimate that I've noticed changing, certainly in the last few years. So some of the investment banks that we that we deal with and funders, I think, are making a shift towards more conscientious investments. And there are the kind of rises in, you know, in green funds and CSR funds, and, you know, people want to invest in things, I think, that have an opportunity to make profit and do good things. And we've always said that those two things don't ever need to be mutually exclusive.
John, question for you. When you were setting up Social all those years ago, you probably had a vision of what you wanted to build in your mind. When you look back on the journey, are you where you expected to be? And if so, tell us about that. If not, and now as you're looking forward to the future, where do you want to get to with the business?
A great question, John. And it's probably why right now in May I'm taking a sabbatical from work for the first time in 8 years. So we're twins. I set up in 2013 as well. So we can claim we set up in a tail end of recession, which always adds a bit of rock and roll to our stories, isn't it? But we did. It was survival, John. Like I said at the beginning, I hadn't owned a business before. I've never ran one business. So what did I think? I did say, I went on record in 2013, said I wanted it to be £1 million turnover business in 5 years and an office in London. We're tracking about 4 million. So we're 4 million after 8 years. And I want it to be a legacy business. I want this business to go on forever and ever. And that whole, you know, that saying, which is quite nice, or some people might find it quite cheesy, is that you know, we really do want to plant this tree so others can shade under its branches in years to come. And that's something I want this business to be. So what's the journey? We want to go to AIM market. We want to list it. We want to IPO, because that, I believe, two reasons. One is we'll present a very credible proposition to the markets in a couple of years, which is a social value led communications group of businesses. We've got 8 P&Ls in the business now, so we've got high growth. So that, and it's profitable, so it's obviously which is very, very good for the markets. But second, that still gives us control about our destiny, about where we're heading and what we're heading to. So rather than be sold to a bigger group, we want to retain that and grow from that. We are looking at other areas. So I mentioned ESG before and net zero. We've now got an ESG division and a net zero division, and shortly we'll have an EDI division. So we've got these divisions we've created to help our clients and support our clients on their journeys. I've made a ton of mistakes over the last 8 years. I've learned from them. I've got 50 colleagues now, so it's we're no longer classed as a small business. And Greg, you're right about the startup journey. I did feel like a startup till about a year ago. Now I think, no longer feel like that kind of that startup mentality. But load of mistakes. I think the final thing I'd like to say on it, John, is I left school with 1 O level back in the day, and a whole host of no confidence. I had very zero confidence in my abilities, and so I look back with pride about what's been achieved. One of the proudest moments was meeting Michael Bloomberg, having breakfast with him about 3 years ago. I was picked by Goldman Sachs to have a breakfast with Michael Bloomberg and the chief executive of Goldman Sachs, and to be sat there talking to them about business felt a moment. I just want to leave a legacy of a great business that looks after people. That's great for the planet, great for profit, and great for people, and that's my vision. God willing, I'll be 55 in 5 years. 55 today, I'll kind of walk away from it in a good way.
John, that is a terrific success story and quite the journey. Greg, your transition from an early career in finance in the City of London to setting up ISO spaces, what were you thinking at the time when you rolled that dice and took your chance, and how has the journey been, and has it actually turned into what you expected it would be 7 or 8 years ago?
I don't know what I expected at the time. I'm very lucky because I started this journey with a good friend who I met working at the stockbrokers, Bench 11, who's the MD of the company, and a co-founder. So I think we get to share that experience with one another, and and I think that's been hugely valuable, not least because he's excellent at doing all of the things in the business that I wouldn't have the first clue about. So and I think we're both, he's a little bit younger than me. I just turned 40, but after sort of 8 years in the saddle now, it feels to me like we're only getting started, to be honest. I think we've got a lot further to go, and we both share an ambition and a passion to sort of drive the business forward, and really see what we can make it. And we think that the construction sector is really, really fertile for innovation, especially, and we think that there's a lot more to be built. So yeah, we're just getting going, I think.
Very good. Well, gentlemen, I have one last question for both of you, and I'll start with you, John. Given the fact that you've come on this journey, if you were talking to a group of startups now, what's the one best tip that you could give a founder to create a successful business?
Find a brilliant number two. So find someone that's, I've got a person in my business that is not like me. I'm messy, I'm entrepreneur, I'm visionary and entrepreneurial, and he's my yin to my yang. He's very measured, focused on the systems and processes, because you don't want to be setting up a business and then still in 3 years dealing with the accounts, dealing with the finance, dealing with the computers, the IT. You need all that just sorted so you can get on and build a business and be visionary. So find a solid number two. It costs you. It costs me. It does cost you to have a good team, but by heck, it works.
Greg, your top tip?
I mean, Cripes, it's, it sort of goes back to what I was just saying and what John was saying then. It sounds cliche because a lot of people have this as a response, but the team you build around you is probably in fact, there's no probably about it. It is the most important thing for our business. There's no possible way that we could have achieved the growth that we've experienced without the quality of the people that work in our team. And that runs right the way from our senior management team and the people that we strategize on the business with, right the way through to at every level. It's the quality of people. Hire good people. Try and find ones that are better than you in every department, and that's not difficult for me, but it works well.
Great people create a great team. Gentlemen, look, thank you so much for joining us. John Quinton-Barber, Greg Curtis, much appreciated. Appreciated your time today. And this has been A Bit of Business, ladies and gentlemen. All the best for now. Thank you.
Thank you, John.